I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I checked my phone and saw the motion alert from my security camera at 3 in the morning. And there she was, Barbara Henderson, our HOA president, creeping around my backyard with a flashlight and what looked like a tape measure. My name is Travis Nelson, and I had moved into the Riverside Meadows subdivision in Gilbert, Arizona about 8 months ago. It was one of those newer communities with identical houses in varying shades of beige and tan, perfectly manicured lawns, and an HOA that seemed to have nothing better to do than measure grass height and count how many potted plants you had on your front porch. I had heard the horror stories about homeowner associations before buying, but the house was perfect for my needs and the price was right, so I figured I could handle a few overzealous neighbors. Barbara Henderson was in her late 40s, with that specific haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," and an attitude to match. She had introduced herself the day I moved in, clipboard in hand, to remind me about the community rules and regulations, all 47 pages of them. I had smiled, nodded, and promptly filed the document away in a drawer I never opened. The first few months had been relatively peaceful. I worked from home as a software consultant, kept to myself, maintained my yard to their specifications, and thought I was doing everything right. Then the letters started coming. The first one complained that my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Apparently, there was an approved color chart that I should have referenced, and my mailbox was midnight black when it should have been classic black. I had stood in my driveway for 20 minutes, staring at my mailbox, trying to see any difference whatsoever. There was none. The second letter informed me that I had hung my American flag 1 inch too far to the left of center on my porch. 1 inch. I had actually gotten out a ruler to check, and they were right, but seriously. Who measures that? The third letter was about my trash cans being visible from the street for approximately 45 minutes past the designated pickup time. I had been in a meeting and could not run outside the second the garbage truck drove away. But this was something else entirely. I sat up straighter on my couch, rewinding the footage to the beginning. The timestamp showed 2:53 in the morning. My backyard motion sensor had picked up movement near my fence line, and there was Barbara, clear as day under the infrared camera, systematically measuring something along my property line. I watched as she moved from the fence to my patio, taking notes on a small pad. She walked around my fire pit, which I had installed about 2 weeks ago, measuring it from multiple angles. Then she moved to the shed I had put up last month after getting written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. She spent a good 10 minutes examining it, measuring, taking photos with her phone. The whole thing was surreal. I had installed a comprehensive security system when I moved in, partly because I had expensive computer equipment for work, and partly because my younger sister had been dealing with a stalker situation the year before, and it had made me paranoid about home security. I had cameras covering every angle of my property, all recording in high definition with night vision. I saved the footage immediately, backing it up to 3 different locations including cloud storage. Then I sat back and tried to figure out what exactly Barbara thought she was doing on my property at 3 in the morning. The sun was just starting to come up, and I knew I would not be getting any more sleep. I made another pot of coffee and started reviewing all of my HOA correspondence. Every approval letter, every complaint, every response I had sent. Everything with my shed and fire pit had been approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I had the emails and signed forms to prove it. My phone rang at 7:30. It was my best friend Marcus, who lived 2 states over in Colorado but called every Sunday morning like clockwork. "You sound tired," he said instead of hello. "Caught the HOA president trespassing on my property in the middle of the night," I replied, taking another sip of coffee. There was a pause. "I am sorry, what?" I filled him in on the whole situation, from the petty complaint letters to Barbara's nocturnal visit to my backyard. "Dude, that is insane," Marcus said. "What are you going to do?" "I do not know yet. I have the footage saved. I am thinking I should probably talk to a lawyer. Definitely talk to a lawyer, and maybe post that footage online. The internet would have a field day with that." We talked for another 30 minutes before hanging up. Marcus was probably right about the lawyer, but I wanted to give Barbara a chance to explain herself first. Maybe there was some reasonable explanation. Maybe there was an emergency with the community property line or something. I spent the rest of Sunday trying to work on a project deadline, but I kept getting distracted by the footage. I must have watched it 20 times, each time noticing something new. The way Barbara kept looking over her shoulder, how she tried the handle on my shed, actually attempting to open it. The fact that she had come prepared with professional-looking measuring equipment. Monday morning, I decided to take action. I printed out several still frames from the video footage, showing clear images of Barbara on my property with timestamps. Then I composed a professional but firm email to the HOA board. "Dear HOA board members," I typed, "I am writing to inform you that at approximately 2:53 a.m. on Sunday morning, HOA President Barbara Henderson was captured on my security cameras trespassing on my property. The attached images show her taking measurements and attempting to access my shed without permission. I am requesting an immediate explanation for this behavior and a formal board meeting to address this violation of my property rights. Regards, Travis Nelson." I attached the photos and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came faster than I expected. By 10 a.m., I had an email from Dennis Crawford, the HOA vice president. "Travis, thank you for bringing this to our attention. This is certainly concerning. However, per HOA Bylaws Section 12.4, board members have the right to inspect properties to ensure compliance with community standards. Barbara was likely conducting a routine inspection. That being said, we typically provide notice for such inspections, and the timing was unusual. I will speak with Barbara and get back to you." I read the email 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each read. Routine inspection, at 3 in the morning, and I distinctly remembered Section 12.4 from my thrilling read through the bylaws. It allowed for inspections with 48 hours written notice and at reasonable hours, defined as between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. I pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws and confirmed what I remembered. Then I sent another email, this time copying all 5 board members and quoting the exact language from the bylaws. "Dennis, thank you for your response. However, I have reviewed Section 12.4 in detail. It specifically requires 48 hours written notice and states inspections must occur between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. I received no notice, and the inspection occurred at 3 a.m. This was not a routine inspection. This was trespassing. I am formally requesting a board meeting within 7 days to address this matter." This time, the response took longer. I spent the day working or trying to work, checking my email every 15 minutes. Nothing came. Tuesday morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not an email, an actual physical letter on HOA letterhead. It was from Barbara herself. "Dear Mr. Nelson, it has come to my attention that you have concerns about my presence on your property. I was conducting measurements related to several complaints we have received from your neighbors regarding unpermitted structures on your property. Upon review, We have determined that both your fire pit and storage shed are in violation of community standards. Your fire pit exceeds the maximum allowable size by 6 inches in diameter, and your shed is positioned 3 inches closer to the property line than regulations allow. You have 30 days to bring these structures into compliance or face daily fines of $100 per violation. Sincerely, Barbara Henderson, HOA President. I stood at my mailbox, letter in hand, absolutely stunned. This was retaliation, pure and simple. Both structures had been approved. I had the paperwork. And now suddenly they were violations because I had caught her trespassing. I went inside and immediately pulled up every email and document related to my fire pit and shed. The fire pit approval specifically stated maximum diameter of 48 inches. My fire pit was exactly 48 inches. I had measured it myself multiple times to make sure it met specifications. The shed approval showed the exact placement I had used, measured from the property line by a professional surveyor to ensure compliance. This was not a mistake. This was Barbara making up violations to justify her trespassing and to punish me for calling her out. I scanned all of my documentation and sent another email to the full board, this time with even more attachments. Board members, I have received a letter from Barbara Henderson claiming violations that do not exist. Attached, please find all original approval documents showing both my fire pit and shed are in full compliance with HOA regulations as approved by the Architectural Review Committee. These false claims appear to be retaliation for my complaint about her trespassing on my property. I am requesting an immediate board meeting and suggesting that Barbara recuse herself from any decisions regarding my property due to this clear conflict of interest. Wednesday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera feed on my phone and saw 2 people I did not recognize standing on my porch. A man in his 60s wearing a polo shirt and khakis, and a woman about the same age in a blazer. I opened the door but kept the security screen closed. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Nelson, I am Robert Patterson and this is Linda Walsh. We are on the HOA board. We wanted to speak with you about the situation with Barbara." "Sure," I said, unlocking the screen door and stepping aside. "Come in." We sat in my living room and I offered them water, which they both declined. Robert did most of the talking. "We want you to know that we take your concerns seriously," he started. "However, Barbara has been our president for 6 years. She is dedicated to maintaining our community standards. I am sure this is all just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I pulled up the video on my tablet and showed them. "This is her on my property at 3 in the morning without notice, without permission. She tried to open my shed. That is not a misunderstanding. That is trespassing." Linda leaned forward, watching the video with a frown. "I admit, the timing is unusual, but Barbara takes her responsibilities very seriously. Perhaps she was unable to sleep and decided to be productive by trespassing on my property and making up violations." I pulled out my folder of documentation. Everything she is claiming as a violation was approved. Here is the paperwork. My fire pit is exactly the approved size. My shed is exactly where it was approved to be placed. This is retaliation. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Now, I do not think we need to use words like retaliation. What word would you prefer? I caught her trespassing," I complained, "and suddenly I have violations that do not exist. That is textbook retaliation." The meeting went in circles for another 20 minutes. They promised to review everything and get back to me. They suggested that maybe I had measured wrong. They hinted that perhaps I should just move the shed and make the fire pit smaller to keep the peace. They even had the audacity to suggest that my security cameras were creating an atmosphere of distrust in the neighborhood. After they left, I sat down and did something I probably should have done days ago. I called a lawyer. The law firm of Peterson and Associates specialized in HOA disputes. I had found them with a quick Google search and a glance at their reviews. The receptionist scheduled me for a consultation the next day. Thursday morning, I met with Jennifer Peterson, a sharp woman in her 40s who listened to my entire story without interrupting. I showed her all the footage, all the documentation, all the correspondence. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and folded her hands. "You have an excellent case. Clear video evidence of trespassing, documented retaliation, false claims of violations. The question is, how do you want to handle this? What are my options?" "Well, you could file a police report for trespassing. You could sue the HOA and Barbara personally for harassment. You could file a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission since HOAs are regulated entities. Or you could try to resolve this through the HOA internal dispute resolution process first." "What would you recommend?" She thought for a moment. "Honestly, file the police report. Even if they do not press charges, it creates an official record. Then send a formal demand letter to the HOA requiring them to rescind the violation notices and discipline Barbara. If they refuse, we file suit. The video evidence is damning enough that they will likely settle quickly to avoid the publicity." I left her office with a plan and a retainer agreement. She was not cheap, but this had gone beyond annoying HOA complaints. This was someone thinking they could abuse their tiny amount of power without consequences. The Gilbert Police Department was professional and thorough. The officer who took my report, a young guy named Officer Martinez, watched the video footage with increasing disbelief. "And she is your HOA president?" he asked. "Unfortunately, yes." "And she had no permission to be on your property?" "None. No notice, no permission, nothing." He took down all the information and gave me a case number. "We will contact her and likely issue a citation for trespassing. If she does this again, call us immediately." Armed with the police report, Jennifer drafted a formal demand letter to the HOA. It was beautifully written and utterly scathing. It detailed every violation of my rights, cited specific laws and HOA bylaws, and demanded that all false violation notices be rescinded, that Barbara be removed from any oversight of my property, and that I receive a formal written apology. They had 10 business days to comply or we would file suit. The letter was sent via certified mail on Friday, which meant Barbara would probably get it on Monday. I spent the weekend jumping every time my phone buzzed, expecting angry calls or emails. Instead, I got something better. I got a knock on my door from my neighbor to the left, a guy named Eric who I had chatted with a few times. "Hey Travis," he said when I opened the door. "I heard you are having issues with Barbara and the HOA. Word travels fast." He laughed. "Dennis Crawford lives 2 doors down from me. His wife was telling my wife all about it. Look, I just wanted you to know that you are not alone. Barbara has been a nightmare since she got elected. She fined us $2,000 last year because our son left his basketball hoop in the driveway overnight. A basketball hoop. It was there for maybe 12 hours. $2,000, $100 a day for 20 days. She claimed it was an unapproved permanent structure. We ended up having to get a lawyer too. Eventually they dropped it, but it cost us almost $5,000 in legal fees." Another neighbor, Patricia, who lived across the street, saw us talking and came over. Then another couple from down the block. Within an hour, I had 6 neighbors in my living room, all with stories about Barbara's abuse of power. Patricia had been fined for having the wrong color flowers in her front yard. The couple, Tom and Susan Martinez, had been cited for parking their car on the street in front of their own house overnight when their garage door opener broke. Another neighbor, James, had been ordered to repaint his entire house because the beige was apparently the wrong shade, even though he had used the exact paint specified in the HOA documents. "Has anyone ever tried to vote her out?" I asked. Eric shook his head. "She runs unopposed every year. And she controls who gets on the architectural review committee and who is on the board. Anyone who challenges her suddenly finds themselves drowning in violation notices until they either give up or move. That is insane. How is that legal?" "It is not," Patricia said. "But it is expensive and exhausting to fight. Most people just give up." We talked for another hour, and by the end of it, I had a group of neighbors ready to support each other in standing up to Barbara's reign of terror. We exchanged phone numbers and email addresses. Eric suggested we start documenting everything and sharing information. Monday morning arrived, and with it came the storm. My phone rang at 7:30 a.m. It was an unknown number with a Gilbert area code. "Hello, Mr. Nelson, this is Barbara Henderson." Her voice was ice cold. "I have received a ridiculous letter from your attorney making baseless accusations. The accusations are supported by video evidence, police reports, and documentation. There is nothing baseless about them. I was performing my duties as HOA president. You were trespassing on my property at 3 in the morning without notice or permission. That is not performing your duties. That is breaking the law. I could have you know that I have consulted with the HOA attorney, and we will be fighting this frivolous complaint. Furthermore, your violation notices stand. You have 25 days remaining to comply. Barbara, I have written approval for everything on my property. You are making up violations as retaliation, and that is also illegal. Good day, Mr. Nelson." She hung up. I immediately called Jennifer and relayed the conversation. She sounded almost pleased. "Perfect. She is not backing down, which means we move forward with the lawsuit. I will have the paperwork filed by end of day." True to her word, by 5 p.m. Monday, I received a copy of the complaint. We were suing Barbara Henderson personally and the HOA for trespassing, harassment, breach of contract, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We were asking for actual damages, punitive damages, and attorney fees. The HOA and Barbara had to be served, which happened Wednesday morning. I know because at 11 a.m. my phone started ringing off the hook. First was Dennis Crawford. "Travis, I cannot believe you actually filed a lawsuit. This could bankrupt our HOA. Our insurance might not even cover this." "Then you should talk to Barbara about dropping the false violations and apologizing. The demand letter spelled out exactly what needed to happen to avoid this. Barbara says she is right and you are wrong. Barbara is lying. I have proof. She trespassed, and now she is retaliating. If the HOA goes bankrupt because she broke the law, that is on her and on the board members who enabled her." Next was Linda Walsh. "This is going to tear our community apart. Barbara is tearing the community apart. I am just defending my rights." Then Robert Patterson. "We have an emergency board meeting scheduled for tonight. I really think you should withdraw this lawsuit and let us handle this internally. You had a chance to handle it internally. You came to my house and made excuses for her behavior. I am done with internal processes." The meeting that night was at the community clubhouse at 7 p.m. I was not officially invited, but Eric told me about it. Apparently, the board meetings were supposed to be open to all homeowners per the bylaws, but Barbara typically did not advertise them. I showed up at 6:55 with my laptop and a flash drive containing all of my evidence. The small clubhouse meeting room had about 15 chairs set up, and 12 of them were already filled with neighbors. Eric, Patricia, and the others from my impromptu meeting were there, along with several people I did not recognize. Barbara walked in at exactly 7 p.m., flanked by Dennis and Robert. She stopped short when she saw the room full of people. "This is a closed board meeting," she announced. According to Section 8.2 of the bylaws, all board meetings must be open to homeowners except when discussing legal matters or personnel issues, Patricia said, reading from her phone. Barbara's face flushed red. "We are discussing legal matters, Mr. Nelson's frivolous lawsuit." "Then I will leave," I said calmly, "but everyone else has a right to be here." Jennifer had advised me not to engage directly anyway. I stood and walked toward the door, but Eric called out, "Actually, we are also here to discuss a motion to remove Barbara Henderson from the board for cause." That stopped me. I turned back around. Barbara looked like she might explode. "You cannot do that." Dennis pulled out his own copy of the bylaws. "Actually, Section 9.6 allows for removal of any board member by a 2/3 vote of the board for conduct detrimental to the community." "Who is bringing this motion?" Barbara demanded. "I am," Dennis said quietly. "I have been on this board for 4 years, and I have watched you abuse your authority over and over. I made excuses because I thought you cared about the community. But trespassing on a homeowner's property in the middle of the night, making up violations as retaliation, that is not caring about the community. That is a power trip." The next hour was explosive. Dennis laid out his motion with specific examples of Barbara's misconduct. Robert seconded the motion. Linda Walsh tried to defend Barbara at first, but quickly backed down when Eric started reading from a list of complaints that various homeowners had compiled. Barbara threatened to sue everyone in the room. She claimed Dennis and Robert were staging a coup. She accused me of orchestrating the whole thing to take over the HOA myself. It was unhinged and desperate and honestly kind of sad to watch. When it came time to vote, the 5 board members had to decide. Dennis voted yes. Robert voted yes. Linda Walsh voted no, still loyal to Barbara. The other 2 board members, Frank Peterson and Deanna Kim, who had been silent through most of the meeting, both voted yes, 4-1. Barbara Henderson was removed from the HOA board effective immediately. She stood up so fast her chair fell over. "This is illegal. I will sue all of you. I will make your lives miserable. You need to leave now," Dennis said firmly. "You are no longer a board member, and this is HOA property." Barbara grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough that a picture fell off the wall. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Patricia started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. Dennis looked exhausted. "Okay, so we have a lot of work to do. First, Travis, on behalf of the board, I want to formally apologize for how you have been treated. Your violation notices are rescinded. Everything on your property is in full compliance and always was." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I am not withdrawing the lawsuit yet, not until I have that in writing and some assurance this will not happen again." "That is fair. We will have a formal letter drafted by tomorrow. And I think we need to seriously review all of our HOA policies and procedures to prevent this from happening again." The meeting continued for another hour. They elected Robert as the new president. They discussed bringing in a professional HOA management company to provide oversight and reduce the risk of individual board members abusing their power. They talked about creating a formal complaint process with real checks and balances. I left that meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. But I also knew Barbara well enough by now to know she would not go quietly. I was right. Thursday morning, I woke up to find all 4 of my car tires slashed. My security cameras caught everything. A figure in dark clothing and a hood approached my car at 4:30 a.m. and systematically slashed each tire before hurrying away down the street. The video was not clear enough to definitively identify the person, but I could see a few details. The build and height matched Barbara. And they got into a car parked 3 houses down that looked very similar to Barbara's silver Honda CR-V. I called the police immediately. Officer Martinez came back out, and this time he had a detective with him. Detective Sarah Richards watched the footage carefully. "Can you zoom in on the license plate of that car?" she asked. I did. The angle was not perfect, but we could make out most of the plate number. Detective Richards ran it on her laptop right there in my living room. "That is registered to Barbara Henderson," she confirmed. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now I go have a conversation with Miss Henderson about her whereabouts early this morning. Do you have any idea what 4 new tires are going to cost? Probably $800 to $1,000. That bumps this up to felony criminal damage. Plus, she has already been cited for trespassing. A judge is not going to look kindly on this pattern of behavior." Detective Richards left, and I called my insurance company and Jennifer. My insurance would cover the tires minus my $500 deductible. Jennifer sounded pleased in that lawyer way that meant this was good for our case, but bad for Barbara. "Criminal charges will significantly strengthen our lawsuit," she explained. "It shows a pattern of harassment and now escalates to destruction of property." 2 hours later, Detective Richards called me back. "We arrested Barbara Henderson about 30 minutes ago. She denied everything at first, but we got a warrant for her phone records and her car. There was a black hoodie in her trunk that appears to have rubber residue on the sleeve consistent with tires. We are charging her with felony criminal damage and harassment." "Wow," I said, sitting down heavily. "I honestly did not think it would go this far." People like her think they are above the law because they have a little bit of power. The reality check is always hard. She posted bail an hour ago, but she has a restraining order hearing tomorrow. I would recommend you request one. Friday morning, I stood in a courtroom for the first time in my life. Jennifer stood beside me as we waited for the judge. Barbara sat on the other side with a lawyer who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The hearing was mercifully quick. I presented the video evidence of the trespassing, the timeline of events leading to the false violations, and the video of my tires being slashed. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patricia Morrison, watched everything without comment. When Barbara's lawyer tried to argue that the tire slashing video was inconclusive, the judge cut him off. "Counselor, I can clearly see your client's vehicle in the footage. The police found evidence in her car, and there is a clear pattern of escalating harassment documented here. I am granting a temporary restraining order. Miss Henderson is to stay at least 100 yards away from Mr. Nelson, his home, and his vehicle. We will schedule a hearing for a permanent order in 30 days. Barbara looked like she wanted to argue, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm to stop her. Outside the courtroom, Jennifer and I walked to the parking lot. "That went well," she said. "Now we wait for the HOA to respond to our lawsuit. With criminal charges filed, I expect they will want to settle quickly." She was right. The following Tuesday, I received a settlement offer. The HOA would pay for my attorney fees, issue a formal written apology, pay me $25,000 in damages, and implement new policies and procedures to prevent future abuse. In exchange, I would release them from liability and withdraw the lawsuit. I talked it over with Jennifer. "It is a good offer," she said. "We could probably get more if we went to trial, but trials are expensive and time-consuming. This gives you everything you asked for in the demand letter and then some. What about Barbara personally? She is facing criminal charges. That is separate from this. And you could still pursue a personal lawsuit against her, though getting money from her might be difficult if she does not have significant assets. I thought about it for a day. Finally, I decided that what I really wanted was for this to be over and for the HOA to be fixed. The money was nice, but the policy changes were more important for the long-term health of the community. I accepted the settlement. The formal apology came a week later, read at an open board meeting that was actually advertised to all homeowners this time. Dennis read it himself, and it was thorough and genuine. They also announced the new policies, including requiring professional oversight for all HOA decisions, limiting the power of any single board member, and creating an independent appeals process for violations. Barbara's criminal case moved slowly, as these things do. She pleaded not guilty at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. 3 months after my tires were slashed, she accepted a plea deal, guilty to felony criminal damage and misdemeanor trespassing. She got 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and had to pay restitution for my tires and my initial attorney consultation fees. The permanent restraining order was granted without objection from her lawyer. Life in Riverside Meadows slowly returned to normal, or rather, it became normal for the first time. The new board with professional management oversight was efficient but reasonable. They enforced rules that mattered, like maintaining property values and keeping common areas clean, but they stopped the petty nonsense that Barbara had thrived on. Eric and Patricia and I became good friends. We started having monthly neighborhood barbecues, and the community actually started to feel like a community instead of a prison camp. About 6 months after everything went down, I was working in my home office when my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera and saw an older woman I did not recognize standing on my porch holding a casserole dish. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" she smiled warmly. "Hi, I am Margaret Chen. I just moved in 2 doors down. I wanted to introduce myself and bring you this casserole as a thank you." A thank you? I almost did not buy here because of the reviews online about the HOA being nightmarish. But then I saw recent reviews talking about how much it had improved, and I read some articles about the changes that were made. When I asked the realtor about it, she told me the whole story, about you standing up to the board president and how it led to a complete overhaul of the HOA policies. I felt myself blushing. I was just defending my property rights. Maybe, but you made life better for everyone here, so thank you. She handed me the casserole. "It is chicken and rice. I hope you are not vegetarian," I laughed. "No, I am not. Thank you so much. This is really kind." We chatted for a few more minutes. She was a retired teacher, widowed, downsizing from a bigger house now that her kids were grown. She seemed lovely, and I found myself hoping she would fit into the neighborhood well. After she left, I sat down with the casserole and pulled up the community Facebook page on my phone. It had been created by Patricia a few months ago as a way for neighbors to actually communicate with each other, instead of just receiving violation notices. I posted a welcome message for Margaret and watched as comments rolled in from neighbors welcoming her. Someone offered to help her unpack. Eric offered to show her around the community amenities. It was warm and genuine and everything a neighborhood should be. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Rachel. "Hey, how is life in HOA hell?" I smiled and texted back. "Actually, pretty good these days." "No way, did the dragon lady move away?" "Better. Got arrested, got voted out, got probation, long story, call you this weekend." "You better. I want to hear everything." That weekend, I sat on my back patio next to my perfectly legal, properly sized fire pit, beer in hand, and told Rachel the whole story over video chat. She was appropriately horrified and entertained. Only you could buy a house in a HOA nightmare and somehow fix the entire HOA, she said, laughing. I did not fix anything. I just refused to be bullied. That is fixing it. Most people would have just moved or given up. You actually made it better for everyone. After we hung up, I sat outside for a while longer, enjoying the evening. It was late September now, and the Arizona heat was finally breaking. The temperature was perfect, low 80s with a slight breeze. My neighbor James walked by walking his dog and waved. Fire pit night, probably later. Want to come by? Sure. I will bring some hot dogs. By 8 p.m., I had a dozen neighbors in my backyard, sitting around the fire pit, drinking beer and soda, telling stories and laughing. This was what I had imagined when I bought a house in a planned community. Not violation notices and measuring grass height, but actual community. Dennis stopped by around 9, looking tired but happy. This is nice, he said, accepting a beer from Eric. This is what it should have always been like. How is the board handling everything? I asked. Good, actually. The management company is doing most of the day-to-day stuff now, which frees us up to focus on actual community improvements. We are planning to redo the playground next spring, and we are getting bids for resurfacing the tennis courts. That is great. It is. And honestly, it is nice not being stressed out all the time. When Barbara was president, every board meeting was a battle. Now we actually accomplish things. Patricia joined us by the fire. Did you hear Barbara is moving? Everyone got quiet. Really? I asked. She listed her house last week. I guess having most of the neighborhood hate you and being banned from HOA activities makes it hard to want to stay. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me was glad she would be gone, that I would not have to worry about running into her at the mailbox or the pool. But part of me felt bad. She had brought this all on herself, but it still had to be hard losing everything like that. I hope she gets help, I said finally, like actual therapy or something. That level of control issues comes from somewhere. Dennis nodded. Her lawyer mentioned in one of the settlement discussions that she had been going through a lot. Her husband left her about a year before she became HOA president. No kids. I think she poured all her energy into the HOA because she did not have anything else. It did not excuse her behavior, but it did explain it a little. Hurt people, as they say. The conversation moved on to lighter topics. Someone told a funny story about their kid's soccer game. Eric announced that he was getting a promotion at work. Patricia showed off pictures of her new grandchild. These were my people now. This was my community. It had been a hell of a journey to get here, from those first petty violation notices to trespassing videos to lawsuits and criminal charges. But we had come out the other side stronger and better. Around 11 p.m., people started heading home. I cleaned up the backyard, put out the fire, and headed inside. I did my usual nighttime security check, making sure all the cameras were working and recording. Old habits die hard. As I got ready for bed, my phone buzzed one more time. An email from the HOA, which still made my stomach clench a little even though I knew the worst was over. It was the monthly newsletter. The new board had started sending them out with actual useful information, instead of just violation warnings. This one announced the playground renovation project, reminded everyone about the upcoming holiday lights contest, and included a recipe exchange section that Patricia had suggested. At the very bottom was a note from Dennis. Remember, this is our community. Let us keep working together to make it a great place to live. I smiled and shut off my phone. Yeah, it was our community now, all of ours. Not Barbara's personal fiefdom, not a dictatorship masquerading as a homeowner association. An actual community where people looked out for each other and treated each other with respect. The whole experience had taught me something important. Standing up for yourself matters, not just for you but for everyone around you who might be too scared or too tired to stand up for themselves. If I had just moved my shed and made my fire pit smaller and accepted the harassment, Barbara would still be terrorizing the neighborhood. But because I refused to back down, because I documented everything and got the right help and followed through, things changed. It had not been easy. It had been stressful and expensive and time-consuming. There were days when I wondered if it was worth it, if I should just sell the house and move somewhere without an HOA. But I was glad I had stayed and fought. As I finally drifted off to sleep, my last thought was about those security cameras that had started this whole thing. I had installed them to protect my property, never imagining they would capture something that would change an entire community. Sometimes the universe works in funny ways. The next morning was Sunday, which meant a call from Marcus. I told him about Margaret and the casserole, about the fire pit night, about Barbara moving away. So it all worked out, he said. Happy ending. Yeah, I guess it did. Any regrets? Like, if you could go back, would you have just ignored the whole thing? I thought about it. No regrets. It sucked going through it, but it was the right thing to do. And honestly, I made some good friends out of it. This neighborhood is actually pretty great now. Look at you becoming the neighborhood hero, I laughed. I am not a hero. I just did not want to move my shed. We talked for another hour, catching up on his life. He was thinking about proposing to his girlfriend. I gave him some completely unqualified advice about rings and restaurants and how to make it special. It was normal and comfortable and exactly what Sunday mornings should be. The weeks turned into months. Fall gave way to winter, which in Arizona meant highs in the 60s instead of the hundreds. Barbara's house sold in November to a young family with 2 kids. They seemed nice, excited about the neighborhood, unaware of the drama that had unfolded over the summer. I introduced myself the day they moved in, bringing over some cookies that Patricia had baked and I had shamelessly claimed as my own welcoming gift. The husband, Jake, was a pharmaceutical rep. The wife, Amy, was a nurse. Their kids were 4 and 6, adorable and energetic. How do you like the neighborhood so far? I asked. Amy smiled. It is great. Everyone has been so welcoming, and the HOA seems really well run. Everything is so clean and organized. Yeah, the HOA is good now, I said, and left it at that. They would hear the stories eventually, but it did not need to be today. The holiday lights contest was the first week of December. The board had allocated actual prize money from the HOA budget, which had never happened under Barbara's reign. First place was $500, second was $300, third was $100. The competition was fierce but friendly. Eric went all out with a massive light display synchronized to music. Patricia did an elegant white lights and greenery theme. James covered his entire front yard with inflatable decorations. I did something simple, just lights outlining my house and porch and a few tasteful decorations. I did not expect to win, and I did not. Eric took first place. Patricia got second, and a family I barely knew won third with an amazing nativity scene made entirely of recycled materials. But the contest brought everyone together. People walked around the neighborhood on cold evenings, looking at the lights, taking pictures, drinking hot chocolate. It felt magical. On Christmas Eve, I got an unexpected package. No return address, just my name and address in unfamiliar handwriting. I opened it carefully, half expecting some kind of final revenge from Barbara. Instead, it was a framed photo of my house, professionally taken and beautifully printed. On the back was a note in the same handwriting. "Thank you for saving our neighborhood. You will never know how many people were suffering in silence before you took a stand. Merry Christmas, from a grateful neighbor." It was not signed, and I never did figure out who sent it. But it made me tear up a little, standing in my living room on Christmas Eve, looking at this photo, and this note from someone whose life I had apparently made better just by refusing to be pushed around. I hung the photo in my home office, right above my desk where I could see it every day while I worked. January brought the 1-year anniversary of moving into Riverside Meadows. So much had happened in those 12 months. I had gone from a new homeowner excited about his first house to being embroiled in an HOA war to somehow helping reform an entire community governance structure. The new professional management company had been a revelation. They handled all the administrative work, processed architectural review requests efficiently, and most importantly, provided objective oversight that prevented any single board member from abusing power. Violation notices still went out occasionally, but only for real issues, and they came with warnings and opportunities to fix things before fines kicked in. The board itself had also changed. Deanna Kim had stepped down, saying she did not have time to commit properly. In the election to replace her, 5 people ran, which apparently was unheard of in the Barbara era. A guy named Chris Yamamoto won. He was a project manager for a construction company and brought a lot of practical knowledge about property maintenance and building codes. I watched all this from a comfortable distance. I had no desire to be on the board myself. I had done my part by forcing change. Now I just wanted to live my life, do my work, and enjoy my house and my neighborhood, but I stayed involved in smaller ways. I helped organize the monthly barbecues, which had become a regular thing. I joined the Neighborhood Watch program. I even coached a youth soccer team for the community league, which was hilarious given my limited soccer knowledge, but the kids did not seem to mind. February 14th, Valentine's Day, I got served with legal papers. My heart sank when I saw the envelope, but when I opened it, it was not what I expected. It was a notice that Barbara's probation violation hearing had been scheduled. Apparently, she had contacted one of the neighbors who had testified against her at the board meeting, violating her restraining order conditions. The neighbor had filed a complaint, and now Barbara was facing additional charges. I did not have to do anything. I was not involved. But the prosecutor's office had sent me a courtesy notice since I was the original victim in the case. The hearing was scheduled for March 5th. I decided not to go. I had moved on with my life, and I did not need to see Barbara dragged through court again. According to the notice, if the violation was proven, she could face up to a year in jail. I never found out what happened at that hearing. I chose not to follow up. Some bridges needed to be completely burned and left behind. Spring in Arizona was beautiful. The desert bloomed, temperatures were perfect, and the community came alive. The playground renovation finished in April, and it was gorgeous. New equipment, shade structures, rubber safety surfacing, and even a splash pad for the brutal summer months ahead. The grand opening was a huge event. Probably 200 people from the neighborhood showed up. There were food trucks, face painting, a bounce house. Kids ran everywhere, screaming with joy. Parents actually talked to each other and seemed happy. Dennis gave a short speech thanking everyone who had contributed to making the renovation happen. He specifically thanked the new management company and the board for their work. He did not mention Barbara or the old problems, and I was glad. It was time to focus on the present and future, not the past. That night, I sat on my back patio again, beer in hand, reflecting on how far we had all come. My phone rang. It was Jennifer, my lawyer. Hey, Travis, just wanted to give you a heads up. Barbara Henderson's house in Riverside Meadows officially closed yesterday. She is gone. Okay, I said. Thanks for letting me know. Also, her probation violation resulted in 6 months in county jail. She started her sentence last week. I was quiet for a moment. I do not know how to feel about that. You do not have to feel anything. She made her choices, and those choices had consequences. You just protected yourself and your property. Everything that happened after was the result of her own actions. I know. It still feels weird. That means you are a decent person. But do not feel guilty. She slashed your tires, Travis. She trespassed repeatedly. She tried to ruin your life because you dared to stand up to her. She earned every consequence she got. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Jennifer was right, of course. I had nothing to feel guilty about. But it was still strange to think about Barbara sitting in jail while I sat on my patio enjoying a beer in the neighborhood she had tried to rule like a tyrant. Life continued to improve through the summer. The HOA budget was in the best shape it had been in years, according to Dennis, because they were not spending thousands of dollars on petty legal battles and excessive enforcement actions. That money went into actual improvements. They resurfaced the tennis courts. They upgraded the community pool with new furniture and umbrellas. They even built a dog park, which became the new favorite gathering spot for the neighborhood pet owners. I had adopted a dog by then, a rescue named Buster, who was some kind of terrier mix. He was energetic and goofy and became an instant hit at the dog park. It was another way to meet neighbors and build community connections. On the 4th of July, the HOA organized a community fireworks viewing party at the clubhouse. We were not allowed to set off our own fireworks due to fire danger, but we could see the city display from the clubhouse parking lot. Someone set up a sound system playing patriotic music. There was a potluck. Kids waved flags and sparklers in the safe, approved containers. It was pure Americana, and it was perfect. As the fireworks exploded overhead, Eric came up beside me. Hey, remember last 4th of July, I thought back. I had only been here a few weeks. I stayed home, did not really know anyone yet. Yeah. I was at home too, because Barbara had sent out a nastagram saying the parking lot was for board-approved events only and threatening to tow anyone who showed up uninvited. Look at this now. He gestured at the crowd of happy neighbors. This is what it should have always been. August marked 18 months since I had moved in, and 1 year since the trespassing incident that had changed everything. The board organized a Community Day celebration with games, food, and activities. There was even a dunk tank, and all the board members took turns being targets. I got convinced to take a shift in the dunk tank, which resulted in me getting absolutely soaked by a very accurate 12-year-old kid. It was hilarious and humbling and exactly the kind of silly fun that communities should have. As I sat dripping in the dunking tank chair, waiting for the next throw, I looked out at the crowd. Families laughing together. Neighbors who were actually friends. A community that functioned like a community should. My phone was in a waterproof bag in my pocket. Later, after I dried off, I would see that Marcus had texted asking how the HOA from hell was doing. I would send him photos of the celebration and say everything he had heard about HOA horror stories was wrong, that it could actually be great with the right people in charge. The sun was starting to set, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Someone had started a pickup basketball game on the courts. The smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs drifted across the park. Kids ran through the splash pad, screaming with glee. This was home. This was community. This was what I had fought for, even when I had not realized that was what I was fighting for. I had thought I was just defending my property rights, just refusing to be bullied. But in doing that, I had helped create something bigger and better. The whole experience had taught me that standing up to injustice matters, even when it is small scale, even when it is just a power-hungry HOA president instead of some larger societal issue. Injustice is injustice, and silence enables it. If good people do nothing, bad people win. Barbara had learned that lesson the hard way. Her need for control, her abuse of power, her escalating harassment had all come crashing down because one person refused to be her victim. And that ripple effect had freed an entire neighborhood from her tyranny. Was I proud of how things had turned out? Yeah, I was. Not in an arrogant way, but in a quiet satisfaction that I had done the right thing and it had made a real difference. As the evening wound down and neighbors started heading home, Dennis came over to thank me for participating. "You know," he said, "I was talking to the management company last week. They said they have used our turnaround as a case study for other HOAs they work with, how to reform a toxic governance structure." "Really, really? You are famous in HOA management circles," he grinned. "The guy who caught the president trespassing and fixed a whole neighborhood." I laughed. "That is a very specific kind of fame. The best kind. The kind that actually matters." Walking home that night, Buster trotting happily beside me, I felt genuinely content. The house that had seemed like such a risky purchase 18 months ago had become exactly what I had hoped for. A home in a community where I belonged. The security cameras still recorded everything, a habit I would probably never break. But these days, they mostly just captured me taking out the trash, neighbors walking their dogs, and the occasional delivery driver. No more middle-of-the-night trespassing. No more harassment. No more fear of what petty violation notice might show up next. Just normal, boring, wonderful suburban life. And that was exactly how it should be.